Welcome to Ichimon Japan. I'm Tony.
And I'm Ryan.
This is part 2 of our, what would you call it? Our two-part series on the Tohoku earthquake.
That sounds good.
Yeah, where I interviewed Daniel Legary, and he actually was in Fukushima Prefecture
You
during
promoted him from Dan to Daniel.
Yeah, well, that I often switch between the two when I'm talking to him. So actually, usually I just call him Dan. But anyway, so he was actually in Fukushima Prefecture in Iwaki City during the 2011 March 11th Tohoku earthquake and nuclear disaster. And if you haven't listened to part 1, go check that out. He talks about his experiences, on the day of the actual earthquake. Just incredible story. But today we're talking about what happened in the weeks after, what he did, how did he manage to survive? Was it okay? What happened to the radiation? Did he leave? All that stuff. It's really, really interesting stuff. So let's just get to it. And we're going to come back at the end to talk a little bit more about some of the things that Dan touches upon. So here we go. Hey, it's me again. So, just a quick note before we get back into the interview. Dan is about to pick up the story just a few days after the earthquake. If you want to listen to what happened during the earthquake, then go back to part 1. Otherwise, let's keep going. So you guys went to the other English teacher's apartment, and spent several days there?
Yes. So he was the area support leader at the time. So he had been there for a couple of years already. So everyone knew where he was, and he was central. I was also central down the street from him. Really, like a 2-minute walk.
Yeah.
But when people were like, "Let's go to his place," everyone knew where it was. So we all just went there, and so we all gathered all the supplies we could from our homes, any water or food that we had. He still had gas, didn't have water though. So we had to, we lived on the side of a small river. So we had to go get water when we wanted to use the toilet. So we had a rule, of course, like if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. That was the main rule.
Right.
Yeah. And that always made it a little unpleasant because, it's kind of made for a sticky bathroom, but we were dealing with it. So I remember, dishes and just kind of making food for each other. There was always a small group of people sleeping, a small group of people watching the TV because the TV was always on, and there was always someone who spoke decent enough Japanese to translate the hourly or bi-hourly reports that were coming out.
Yeah.
And then a few of us were just trying to kill time. Some people tried to, connect to the internet, which I think I remember the internet was fine.
Yeah.
So the only thing we didn't have was water. We had gas, but by then the whole city shut down. So you look outside and it looked like, the set of a zombie horror film, right? It was just, and it was mid-March, so it wasn't very sunny. It was gray, pretty, just so quiet. And then once in a while, there was a couple of places that eventually opened up to get fresh water. Some of them were like wells in the ground, so it was safe. We ended up going to a big kind of the department store / grocery store. Waited in line for 3 or 4 hours at least, just to get a box of water. So it was 30 bottles of 500 milliliter bottles of water, right? So that was kind of, we all had a little bit of a duty. If we had to go get water for the toilet, we took turns. If we had to go get something, or if someone wanted to go somewhere, because a couple people had their cars, but of course with no gas or anything, they couldn't travel long distances. So say someone had forgotten something at their apartment, or they wanted to go somewhere for some reason to see somebody or talk to somebody, we'd all kind of take turns dividing the roles. And we did that for about a week. It's strange how it all seems like one big blurb to me now. It didn't seem like that long. But I'm sure that when I was there, it felt longer. And so we, for about 6 days. Then finally we heard of a bus that would leave Iwaki Station to go to the Fukushima airport twice a day, one early in the morning and one late at night. And that's when the rest of us decided, because some of us had eventually trickled away, had found ways to like leave or whatever. So at the end, there was about 6 or 7 of us. And I decided to take my chances, go to the airport, and try to fly to Sapporo, where I had lived as an exchange student for a year. So, and just kind of see, just to kind of get my bearings, because nothing was really going on. So we did that. The guy whose apartment we were at, he is the only person who stayed behind. He wanted to help a nearby restaurant owner whom we were all very close to, because he was an Indian guy. He had his own little Indian restaurant, and there's a place that's all very close to our hearts. And he wanted to stay there and help him, like, just kind of get his restaurant up in order. And we had been doing that actually I remember that now. Like, if I wasn't in the apartment, I was at Baba's, because we were helping, just kind of clean up his restaurant and just kind of get things going. So, we got on the bus and went to the airport, and then getting to the airport is a whole other thing that happened after that.
So, during that week or so that you were in the apartment with the other English teachers, I guess you guys didn't really have much trouble for food. It was just water that you had to go out to get.
Not that I can remember. I think we all had enough food, and it's surprising. I remember now realizing how much water we use to cook and clean, and how it's really easy to take that for granted. Like, hey, we got food. It's like, oh, but wait, we need water to cook this, or you need hot water for these cup noodles or whatever. You need liquids. A lot of it requires a lot of water, and when you're trying to ration it for drinking, you can't be picky,
Definitely.
I remember there was one ALT, and I'm not gonna name any names.
Sure.
But, this person really wanted a coffee, and in my head, I'm like, seriously, like, I know you want, maybe for this ALT, they wanted to try to find a sense of normality in everything that's going on, and just kind of wanted a coffee. But in my head, I'm like, we're really trying to ration water here. Like, we shouldn't be boiling for coffee or whatever. And another ALT kind of like exploded at this person.
Oh man.
And they were like, we're trying to, just like, we're in a disaster situation. Like there was some
absolutely
tension. And they're like, it wasn't all just good times at the apartment. Everyone was really stressed out. We tried to relax as much as we could, played some games or some board games or whatever, and just kind of joked around and see what we could do. But at the same time, I remember not really being hungry, probably because I was like, when you're thinking like, okay, am I going to have enough food to eat, or, it's kind of easier to go without food in that kind of situation. I know this sounds weird to say, but you don't really think about hunger, or even like the fact that you haven't showered in 6 days. Like, that's just not, it doesn't really bother you, because you're thinking like, am I being bombarded with radiation right now? Or how am I going to get out of this situation? Are things going to get worse? Like, what's the guy on the TV going to say next? Is it going to be that, like, are we quarantined? Like these are the kinds of things that would go through your head, even though most of the thoughts were just outrageous. But at the time, they didn't seem that way.
Definitely.
So I don't really remember a time being like, oh, I'm starving, or like, we have so little food. We had enough. But then again, I just didn't really feel like eating. You know? what I mean?
No, absolutely. Like I said, even though I wasn't in the area, I was kind of glued to the TV and just watching what was happening, and it seemed like, oh my God, this is how bad is this going to get? So yeah, like you're just focused on that.
Exactly.
Okay, so then you managed to get to the nearby airport. How did that go?
So we got to the airport, and the airport was basically, you could basically call it an evacuation center. A lot of people wanted to get flights to get out of there, and maybe didn't want to brave the roads, or maybe they had family in parts of Japan that you couldn't really get to by car that easily. So there were blankets everywhere. There were families huddled together. And there was people everywhere, and it kind of looked like an evacuation center. It wasn't people everywhere like a shopping mall. It was people everywhere with whatever belongings they could grab, sitting in a corner or on the floor, trying to figure things out. And there was this. I remember walking in, and there was this long line, went all the way back to the airport. And one of the first things I did was get in that line, even though at the time I wasn't 100% sure what it was for. I knew that it was like, this is probably the ticket line. If it's not, I'll just get out of the line. But it's like, okay, if I want to fly out of here, I gotta get in this line. Other ALTs at that time, we kind of split up from there. There were a few that wanted to take their chances, got together in a cab to go to the nearest city with a bullet train, and would take a bullet train somewhere else. I decided to take my chances with the plane. So it was, in the end, at the beginning of the week, we were about 12, and by the time I was at the airport and some of them had left, it was only about 2 or 3 of us left. The other ones were taking planes to Fukushima Airport, only serviced one plane to Sapporo and one plane to Osaka. So they were going to go to Osaka, and I was going to go to Sapporo. So that was it. Like, I was going my own way. I was going to be by myself. So I stood in line for, I can remember, about 13 to 14 hours. From the time we got there, they said tickets will be on sale tomorrow. And tomorrow was, it was like, we went there at 7:30 in the morning, right? So we took the bus, we got there at 8:30 or whatever, and tickets go on sale tomorrow. That means you're in line until 7:30 the next day. But I remember that the line started moving at 4 a.m. or something like that. So it wasn't exactly, or 11 p.m. It was about 13, 14 hours of waiting. Finally, I got my ticket, and again, I wasn't really thinking about food. We just snacked on a couple, most of what we had was the dry, ready-to-eat stuff or little snacks and stuff. And got on the plane and flew to Sapporo. And it all just kind of happened in a blur. Just all, just there I was.
Right. So you get to Sapporo, and it's basically like normal, right?
It was probably like you in Kobe. It was so strange to get off that plane, because it's only about an hour, 15-minute, plane ride. It's not far, and to go from a week of survival mode, watch what you eat, watch what you drink, don't go outside, don't open the windows. If you go outside, move quickly. You haven't showered in 7 days, or 8 days or whatever. You just spent 13 hours in a line, all kinds of things, like a lack of sleep, a lack of, the lack of nutrition your body got, it kind of catches up with you, and you start to feel like garbage. So I arrived, and was like business as usual. People were out, people were laughing, people were going out getting drinks. There was no aftershocks. It felt strange not to feel an earthquake. I know that's kind of funny.
That's bizarre, but that's the reality. Yeah,
it is. Aftershocks continued daily for about a month, and then after that, like every couple of days there'd be a decent one, or a very small one every, like, once in the morning, once in the afternoon kind of thing. And so I was in a place and nothing's shaking, everyone's fine, people are going to work, you know, nothing's destroyed, like there's no debris, there's no nothing, there's no sense of urgency or panic. Well, there wasn't really much sense of panic, but there's no sense of, like, you know, get out. There wasn't a sense of that. And that's when it all came down on me. I went to the old house that I'd stayed in, like an old host family's house, and there was no one there. But my host sister at the time, she gave me the code to go in, and so I just did. I took a shower, and that's when it all just kind of started coming back to me, like just all of the stress and everything I just experienced, and it was very emotionally heavy for me at the time.
So, I mean, I guess this became even clearer as time went along, but ultimately the part of Fukushima where you were, it wasn't particularly like bombarded by radiation or anything, right? Like it was in a different, I guess, not downwind, I guess you would say.
Exactly. Yeah. Thankfully we were fine. Because we were basically directly south of the power plant, but anything west of it, west, a little bit northwest as well, is unlivable. Right. And for many kilometers, maybe not 42, but that's the thing, like that took months and months to quantify, to find, to map out. Nobody knew. It was all, you know, it very well we acted as if it might as well have been
absolutely
us, like kid, right? So, because, you know, you just can't tell. And during that first week in Sapporo, I still remember contacting my landlord, who I'd gotten very close with over the last few months, and saying, like, just telling him where I was and that I was safe, and that he was like, you know, and he would say things like, if we die, thank you for being part of our lives. And that just totally made me break down. Like, it was not something you would really expect to hear. Like, a week ago, I was fine, you know, like things were fine. I was enjoying my life. A week later, someone tells you, like, thank you in case you don't make it.
Just doesn't make sense.
That's a shock. It was shocking. And I had a lot of trouble, even though I was in Sapporo. I was not comfortable. I was not okay. I was still in a little bit of dealing with things emotionally. And I met a couple of friends. Like, we tried going out and stuff, and I tried putting on a happy face, but it felt so strange and almost like betraying to be doing so, because, you know, it's everything that would just happened around me, and all the people that I cared about, some of them who were still there and still struggling and suffering. Like, I couldn't take my mind off that. So it was, it wasn't hard for me to go back to Iwaki, which I did about 8 to 9 days later. I checked with the guy whose apartment we stayed in, and he had started volunteering. He said that things were getting a little bit, you know, things were starting to look up. You know, things have started picking up, like the recovery has kind of started. So I'll always take my hat off to him, because I think he's one of the bravest people I'd ever met for having, you know, stuck around and done that. And so with him there, it gave me the confidence to say, okay, you know, let's go back. It's, you know, so I headed back, and immediately just started with helping with the debris cleanup, mostly on the coast from the tsunami. You know, every day we would go, and we would, you know, pack stuff, get stuff off the roads. There was this giant, massive pile of garbage, of debris. So we would move everything from tatami mats to septic tanks to just like pieces of wall and furniture and books and all matters of things. We just, you know, piled up on this massive thing, and and worked away. And with that, after that, things started to get normal again. We started going back to the schools, even though the students weren't there. We would go back to help, clean up with whatever they needed. I would go back and start thinking about English classes. There would be radiation tests every hour in the courtyard, like in the yard. They go out with a Geiger counter. Within a couple of months, like these massive Geiger counters were placed at every school and all around the city. Like every couple of blocks, there would be this just big white machine, kind of like in any public place, a park, downtown, schools, anywhere. Probably every 500 meters or so, you'd see these big kind of things with a reading on it. So and so microsievert. It's like 0.023 microsieverts. Like which was, when you would look it up, it was totally normal background. And you actually got more radiation flying than like where it was at. Like the background radiation in New York was higher.
Right.
Like you were fine. And then life started to kind of blossom back. Because it was spring.
Yeah.
And school started back up a little bit later, of course, like end of April, mid-April or something like that. We started back. We started school again. So and next thing I knew, I was teaching classes and going back home, and started going out again, and things, businesses reopened, and things just started getting back to normal. But those first couple of weeks were definitely the most difficult.
Definitely, yeah. So, I mean, even today, like there's still huge swaths of that area of Fukushima that have changed forever. People have not gone back. People still dealing with that. But in that specific area in Iwaki, where you were, I think you've been back since, right? Like how have you seen it deal with in the aftermath?
You go back now, it's like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
I've been back multiple times since then, usually once every couple of years, or less. And like there is no sign of anything having gone wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Only in my head do I notice things. Like there would be like an old shed or a building that was destroyed during the quake was replaced with a nice new building, like a nice new business or whatever. Or the things that have changed are things that had nothing to do with it, like new business sprouting up, or an addition to the station, or all kinds of stuff. Everything was as it was.
Yeah.
There's no. I don't think there's any stigma against going up in that area or anywhere. Now you can drive by the plant.
Yeah.
Like you can actually drive past the power plant.
Yeah.
That's how close you can get to it. I wouldn't hang around.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even now today. And the whole, how they're dealing with the nuclear disaster, I have mixed feelings / mixed opinions about, because as much as I wish they'd be doing a better job and get away with the red tape dealing with a disaster of this scale.
Yeah.
It's probably something most of us laymen cannot even comprehend.
Absolutely.
In terms of work. So I'm a little bit of column A, column B.
Yeah.
And it's really sad to see that so much radiation has been exposed to the nearby nature in the towns of Namie and those areas, which I had been before, like just lovely little country areas.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been back. I will be going back, probably almost 100% confirmed in this year. At the end of the year, I'll be heading back. So yeah, and I just love going back there. It's like going home to me. Like this honestly, it's the feeling I get when I get there. It's not one of a tourist arriving in a different country. It's like, finally I get to come back to my old house, or like my old, even though everything's changed. Like I don't know anyone who lives there anymore, really, except for my landlord and maybe Baba. But I like just being there. It's very comforting to me.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, like living through any kind of disaster experience like that, it really makes you appreciate what you have, right? It really makes you, like you said with the water, for example, right? You don't realize like how much of something you use until you have to measure it very carefully. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't think about the daily things you do, and just the everyday life that you live, the little things, from having someone pick up your garbage, having someone, taking a shower and then doing the dishes, like garbage, right? Like there was no garbage man or anything, right? That stuff piled up. What were we supposed to do with it?
Yeah.
Well, we got to take it somewhere.
Yeah.
Take it where? Like, is there a special place? Nobody knows. Like, we don't know. Who do we talk to? There's no one out there. Like, how do you do? Like, these were all little things that we had to kind of figure out and deal with. Like, are we going to reuse that pot or that pan? Or are we going to, do we want to charge our phones in case they die? Like, how much are we going to use, like, of energy, power? Like, okay, let's count the food that we have. Like, do we have enough to sustain each other? Like, well, if we only eat this much or that much, or can we go to Tokyo? Like, can we risk somewhere going for gas? Like, it's just not something you really think about. Yeah. And when it all comes on you so suddenly, so quickly, it's definitely. I should really have some kind of like disaster kit in my house, even though I don't right now. It's pretty safe here. But
definitely.
Anyways, it's just it's not something I would wish on anybody.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that experience. It's like I said. I mean, even for I think the vast majority of foreigners that were living in Japan, they were not in that area. So that's a little glimpse into how one aspect of what it was like for people in Japan. So thank you. Yeah,
you're welcome. And I mean, like, my story is something, but then there's those that were like in the cities that got hit hard with the tsunami. Like, I can imagine, like, I can't even fathom the difficulties they might still be going through because of that. Like, yeah. I consider myself to be lucky, basically. Yeah. Even though I had to go through all that, I was one of the lucky ones.
Yes. So there is an article in Wasabi Magazine. I will include a link in the show notes where Dan takes us through the whole story. It's very beautifully written, so I do recommend it. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you about writing an article or doing translation from Japanese to English, where can they contact you?
They can contact me at Dan Legare, so DANLEGARE, translations at gmail.com, and we'll see what I can do from there.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for talking again. I had a very nice time talking to you, as always.
As always, a pleasure.
Okay, so, well, actually, you know what? Ryan, let me ask you. So, had you heard any stories like Dan's, like what he did with the other ALTs, like spending a week basically locking themselves away and having to go to the river to get water, like for the toilet?
Like firsthand accounts, no. I mean, I heard people were in situations like that, but this was the first such firsthand account I've ever heard. As I mentioned before, where I was, basically nothing happened, and among my foreign and Japanese friends, no one really had a Tohoku connection.
Yeah, me either. Yeah.
So, like, the closest would be, like, they had a cousin who lived maybe in, like, Tokyo or Ibaraki, which is closer, but still not in the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that was a crazy story. But, he wasn't the only one in that apartment. There were plenty of others. And I'm sure that plenty of others in cities and towns, like, around Fukushima were in similar situations. So,
yeah.
So something that I wanted to talk about in this part was, what has happened in the years since, and neither Ryan or I have ever been to the Tohoku area. I would love to visit sometime, hopefully soon, but I don't have any firsthand knowledge of this. But I have interviewed a few people that are from the general Tohoku area. For example, I interviewed the president of a sake brewery that is called Aizu Homare. They're pretty well known in that area. They've actually, I think they've given sake to like President Obama and President and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So they're a very well respected brand. And part of the reason why they are in that part of, I'm pretty sure it's Fukushima, is because the water is so pure. But something that happened in the years following the earthquake is, of course, concerns about radiation, right? So if you label your food from Fukushima, then immediately some people go, "Oh my God, it must be polluted, must be irradiated." But that wasn't the case for them. They were totally fine. Much kind of like what Dan described, that ultimately because he was not in the direction of the wind, like nothing happened in terms of radiation. But they still, that sake brewery, they would still get calls, for example, from people say, "Oh, I got your sake, but because it's from Fukushima, I just ended up pouring it down the drain because I'm not going to drink this." Like, so they would get complaints from people, not, I think, from outside of Japan, especially, that don't understand the actual geography of the region, and that most of that region is actually totally fine in terms of radiation. Yeah. So of course, recovery too has taken a long time, and many people have left the area and they're not going to go back because they started a family. Like it's been 9 years basically since that disaster. So if they leave with a 10-year-old kid, now they're 19 years old, right? Like, are you going to go back? Like,
a lot of them are settled in new places now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, the other like complication is that with a lot of these rural areas, the population was already shrinking. And so like this only made it worse. So you're getting a lot of towns that probably are just not going to ever recover because there's just not enough people that will go back to try to, bring the population back up. So there's definitely a whole lot of problems still in the area. And yes, recovery does move on, and I'm sure things have gotten better. But that just because you don't hear about it in the news as often doesn't mean that everything is fixed, right? Like you still hear reports about the polluted water, right? The irradiated water in the power plant, like how they're going to dispose of that, or they're just going to dump it in the ocean and all that. Like, yeah. So it's definitely still a very relevant topic, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, anything else, Ryan? Can you think of anything else that you want to mention?
So this is such a small thing, but again, since I live so far away, it's kind of the only direct impact it had on where I lived, is that lots of products from the Fukushima area just sort of disappeared from grocery stores. Mm-hmm. So the only foreign food that I would always try to make myself, because I liked them, was tacos. So I would buy a lot of beef. Yeah. And all of the beef from the entire Tohoku region just like disappeared from my grocery store. Yeah. And for the first time, we were getting beef from like different countries that we'd never had before. Like we had Mexican beef, I think New Zealand beef. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, beef is beef, so it wasn't really a big deal, but it was just surprising that like an entire industry somewhere along the production line kind of got turned on its head because of this.
Yeah, and even if they weren't like close to it or affected in any way directly by the radiation, just having Fukushima on it already like added this stigma to it.
Yeah, they got like a stigma just from being nearby.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's sad. I'm sure many farmers and businesses had a really, really tough time, and maybe some never even got to get back into business, because imagine like how long it took to recover from that. Like it maybe they didn't even start like selling stuff for a year or more. Who knows, right?
Yeah. I do remember Japanese friends warning me not to buy certain products and stuff. Yeah. And then other people like, "Oh no, that one's fine. It was far away." Like, "Oh, but I'm not buying it anyway."
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you can understand, right? Like, of course, a family wants to make sure that what they're going to be eating at home is safe. So yeah, an abundance of caution. But unfortunately, a lot of rumors and untrue things also spread around. So, and just a total, like, how Dan mentions the whole measuring of radiation, like something microsieverts and all that. Like, I had never heard of that measurement system until I started watching Japanese TV during the earthquake. Like this whole like measuring what is a safe amount of radiation. You just don't think about those things. Like the average person has no understanding what the bar is for dangerous amounts of radiation, right?
Yeah, it's something you never think of.
So definitely, I mean, I think the easiest way you can, if you want to just, even if it's a small thing, help out the Tohoku area, is go check it out, right? There's plenty of things to see in that area. And, just go check out. There's great food in the area. You can always just visit, even if there isn't, like what Dan was doing, like actual volunteering or anything. Obviously, that's not a thing that's going on to the same extent. But you can always just go check it out, eat some food, spend some money. That definitely does help the area.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like private, but I think we might be going to visit there sometime soon.
Yeah, totally not private. I don't mind talking about that, but I would definitely. I'm thinking about visiting in later this year, and if we can set it all up, hopefully we can take a quick trip through the Tohoku area. I would love to check that out. I've been to, I think, pretty much every major area of Japan to some extent, but not Tohoku. That's like the one big area that I have not been to yet.
And Tohoku is pretty big.
Exactly. Yeah. It's pretty big. There's a lot more than Fukushima. So, really interesting place for a variety of reasons. It's got some really interesting history too. So, hopefully we can get on that. And if we do end up doing that, then we can come back and talk a little bit more about Tohoku after that.
Yeah, that'll be a good part 3.
Yeah. Cool.
Next year.
Next year. Yeah. 2021 probably. So, this is a very early tease. Anyway, so I think that about covers everything. You got anything else, Ryan, or are we good?
Nah, I'm good.
All right, cool. So come back next time where we'll be talking about something totally different. So see ya.
See ya.